Welcome to the second day of the course. Let's get back to the lectures. I'll be talking about 4 different topics. So there are 4 shorter topics. I'll talk about approximately 10-15 minutes on each topic, and we stop, ask questions on each as we go. And like last week, the whole thing takes about an hour. Right. So the first topic that I want to talk to you about today is shorting. Anybody has heard about shorting before? Yeah, The Big Short. Have you seen the movie? Yeah? Good. If not, then I can definitely recommend it. And if see the movie and see how much of it you understand. I mean, there's a lot of fast talking going on, and probably much of it you wouldn't understand the first go. But actually, much of it is not really that tough in terms of financial setting. I mean, they're talking a bit too fast. You have to understand what they're saying. But as far as the underlying mechanisms of shortings are concerned, it's actually not that difficult to follow. But so see it maybe once before and once after the course, and see if you understand what's going on. It's also interesting from the perspective of doing your presentation on one of the crises, especially if you're looking into the crisis of 2008. All right, so let's look at what shorting is. But before going into the shorting itself, I want to put it into the context of the Markowitz model, right? So I'll get back to what shorting is, but for a second, let's have a look back at the Markowitz model as I presented to you last time. So this is what I call a plain vanilla Markowitz model. This is the simplest version of the Markowitz model that later today we are going to change a little bit. We are going to add some constraints, practical constraints of different sorts to this model, right? But this is the plain vanilla Markowitz model in its simplest form. So what you had was obviously the 2 terms. So can somebody tell me what are the 2 terms in the objective function? We are maximizing what? We are maximizing the return, the portfolio return, and then we are maximizing the negative of risk, right? And maximizing the negative of risk means minimizing risk. So we are maximizing return, minimizing risk at the same time, and we are doing that using lambda as weights on these 2 different terms, right? So that's the main part of the Markowitz model. Then we have the sum of x's being equal 1. That means, what does it mean? So that means we want to invest 100% of all our money, right? We want to be fully invested in the markets, right? And finally, we've got this last constraint which says that x's have to be greater than 0, greater or equal 0. So what does that mean? No shorting allowed, right? So that's actually, I didn't put it that way last week, but essentially that means, well, you have to have all your weights have to be positive, but then again that means that there's no shorting allowed. But let's go back to for the benefit of everybody who doesn't know what shorting is. So let's take a step back now and go through an example of what shorting is. Right. So in financial markets, it's allowed to sell something first and then buy it back later on. This is what shorting essentially is, right? So that would be a bit of a funny thing, right? In normal markets, I mean, you can't go in and if I can't sell a liter of milk or something to that effect and then buying it back later, right? I mean, I can't get the money for anything in real markets. And essentially in financial markets, that's not exactly what's happening either. So nobody is paying you something for you are selling something that you don't have, and then you can buy it back later. But you can have an account where you can actually not get the value, but you can get the value that you're selling the underlying asset for. You can get it on the book, so you don't actually get the money up front. You'll just get it on a book, and then by the end of the day, when you are buying back your position, at the end of the day, you can settle your position. So you don't really, even though it sounds kind of funny, how can I sell something I don't have? You actually don't get the money for it, so kind of somebody is controlling this transaction. So let's look at how it works. You can see it best with this example, where let's say I want to short 500 IBM shares. And let's say at the starting date, that being, let's say, 1st of April 2005, the price of IBM shares was $120. Now, for some reason, if I believe that the prices of this stock are going to fall, then shorting could be a good idea, right? Shorting is an action which is going to make you some money if the price of the underlying is going to fall over time, right? So what is happening here is that I short 120 stocks of IBM at a price of 120. And what does it mean? It means that I get 500 times 120. That's equals $60,000. That is essentially the money that I get up front for selling the shares of the IBM that I don't have, right? But again, I don't get the money in my pocket. I can't get the money and run. The money is put on a book, and it's an accounting book. So I've earned $60,000 up front, but I have to wait until the whole series of transactions is over. Now, in order to make it more realistic, let's say that this IBM stock is paying dividends. You know dividends? You know what dividends are? So it's kind of the payments on a stock down the road. So the stock has a price, but then also some stocks also paying dividends. They pay maybe, you know, in this case we are paying $1 dividend per share, right? So that means that if, let's say, the underlying share on the 1st of May should have paid $1 in dividend, then it means, and I have 500 shares, so I should pay 500 dividends. So what does it mean? It means that I receive 60,000 when I short the 500 stocks. Then I should pay the dividends. That's the 500. Again, everything is going into my book. So I pay the 500 dividends that the original holder of the shares have to receive. And then by the time that then I don't want to play anymore, I say, well, now I'm done. I want to close this position. So I short to begin with. And here at some point, let's say 1st of July, I decide to close this position because I think, well, the price has fallen enough. Now the price has gone from 120 down to 100. It's time to close the position. So I order to close this position. The price is 100, so I just have to buy them back at the price of 50,000, right? So I received 60,000. I sold them for 60,000. I paid $500 in dividends. And then by the time I had to buy it back, the price had fallen. So I buy it back at the cheaper price, 50,000. And I gain $9,500, and that's the money I can put into my pocket and run, right? So that's the real kind of profit that I got from this transaction, right? So that's how shorting works in practice. One more thing that you have to notice with shorting. I mean, if you want to do, anybody has been entering into a short position in financial markets? That there is. If you want to do that, one other thing that goes with shorting is that you have to have a margin account. So you have to have some money that you can put aside as guarantee so that if your position goes, if the markets go against you, then you have to have some guarantee that the exchange can essentially take their loss from that money so they don't incur any loss, right? So in this case, let's just assume that in day one, I put a margin of, let's say I have 10,000, or let's say just 1,000 US dollars. So I have a margin of 1,000 US dollar at day one, right? And the price was 60,000, right? So I buy this 500. So I'll buy. Sorry, that's short or sell essentially. It's called shorting or it's called short selling. So I short sell 500. That was multiplied by the 120. So I have a value of 60,000, right? Now what happens was that if the price went down to 100 from 120, right, that was a gain of 10,000. Now what happens if the day two, so the price, let's say the price was 120, right? If at day two, the price doesn't go down, let's say it goes up. So it all of a sudden goes up to 130. Then what is, I have 60,000 in my account. but there is a difference of 10. So what happens here? I have 500 that I have to, to buy them back, I have to pay 10 extra. So I have lost how much? 5,000, right? So it's 500 times the difference of these two. I have lost 5,000 USD. So you see, this is kind of risky business, right? So if the price goes against what I expected, then I can lose money, right? And so what happens with my margin now? How much margin is left?
Minus 4,000, so you get margin call?
No, but just if I look at, if I have, so I have minus 4,000 just to begin with. Wouldn't they close
your position, cover the loss?
That's exactly true, because what happens is that would be for probably kind of in the old days if they were not monitoring your transaction every second, which is essentially the case. So what would happen in this case is that long before the price goes to 130, they're going to close your position and you're going to lose your original $1,000. Right? So within the day, when the price goes to 122, right? So when the price gets to 122, you're gone, you're dead. You lose all your money. You lose 100% of your margin. So see the amount of risk. So an increase in price of less than 2% means you lose 100% of your original investment. So in that sense, that's what you hear when you hear shorting is a risky business. That's what's going on. So essentially, you are gearing. One thing is that you are reversing. That's in on its own is maybe not that much of a problem. But if I only have 1,000 margin, and then if I go and buy this 500 shares of IBM, then I'm also leveraging. I'm both short and I'm leveraging very heavily. More than 50 times leveraging my position, right? So a small increase of less than 2% means I lose all my money. So that's how this would work in practice. Well, I mean, in practice, essentially the way it works is that by the time you are down to maybe $200 or $300, they will already close your account. So they wouldn't allow you to go to zero in most exchanges. Right. So you get this is how shorting is done. And if you are looking into our Markowitz model, what do we need to do in order to allow shorting? We just remove that constraint. So essentially, now we're talking about adding constraints, but I'm essentially starting by when we want to allow shorting. We have to go back to the plain vanilla Markowitz, just remove that one constraint, and all of a sudden, you actually allow shorting. So that's one of the things that you can play with. I don't think I even made it into an exercise, but you can go and go back to your original model and remove that constraint, the positivity constraint on the variable x, and see what happens. Or maybe I make the first one. I will ask you actually a question. If you are running the Markowitz model for, you're just maximizing the expected return. So if what you were doing was that if you were maximizing for lambda equals 0, so you would be maximizing expected return, and if I remove then this one, what would happen? If somebody's quick, maybe you can run it on GAMS and see what would happen. But what would you expect if you want to think yourself to, if I was only maximizing my expected return of the portfolio and I allow shorting? Yeah, what happens?
Just choose the one with the highest return or the highest loss?
It will put the money in the one with the highest return. But what happens, because now notice that your x can be both positive and negative.
Yeah, even the one with the highest, okay, never mind. Yeah,
The first question maybe, would GAMS come with a solution altogether? Would there be a feasible solution for that?
It was cycle.
It would be, yeah, it's in optimization language, we call it, that would be an unbounded problem. Because that's probably what you mean by that as well. It's unbounded, so meaning that you can, because what you were getting at is that then your optimization has to find the asset with the highest return and the one with the lowest return, right? So you can go short on the one with the lowest return and go long. Long is the opposite of going short. You go long on the one with the highest return, right? And you can make, you know, infinite amount of money based on that, which is obviously rubbish because you're not supposed to be using this model without considering risk explicitly in the model, right? So that is, but then you would get an infeasible or you get an unbounded solution. You get that? So that it would be, let's say I have asset 1, which has a return of, let's say 3%, and then you have asset 5, which has got a return of 1%, right? So if you are shorting in this one with a return of 1% and you are going into long of 3%. And notice what's happening here. Your sum of x's has to be equal 1, right? So I can just buy as much as I want, go long in asset 1, and I can go short exactly in the same amount, and my sum of x's would be 1 anyway, right? So I can of course have half here, and minus half. Sorry, that would be then. I can have 1 here, and I can have 0 here. That gives 1 plus 0 gives 1, right? But I can have 2 here, and minus 1 here, and so on, right? So I can, as far as the sum of these two guys would be 1, then everything's fine, right? So I can go for 100 here, and this would be minus 99, right? Just one number less. Opposite, then that constraint is true, and you can see that I can go infinitely large in both of them and still get 1, and that's what means that this model would be unbounded, right? But that happens when you are looking into the first term. Then I want you to see what happens as you put some weight on the lambda, because at some point that would not be the case anymore. Right? Then the model, once you are having risk into the model kind of confines itself, because then risk matters as well. Because what's happening with this game that we are doing here, obviously the average return is, if your only thing you cared about was average return, then you're only looking at the difference between this 3% and this 1%, and you can do this business forever, right? But if you're looking at risk as well, as you are going down, you're adding to the risk, right? So as you're putting more weight on the risk, then at some point the model will stop continuing down that road. That's one more reason. So intuitively think of it this way. Again, that's something I mentioned last week as well, that optimization models are actually, when it comes to asset allocation, they are stronger when it comes to risk management rather than to kind of second-guessing returns in the future. But I want you to play with that a little bit. You had a question?
Wouldn't it be the other way around, that once lambda is 0, that you have that you wanna only have return, you have an upper bound?
Right. Did I say 1? Yes. Yeah, so for lambda equals 0, exactly. For lambda equals 0, you would get this. You would get this one. So we're right about that. So for lambda 0, you'll get that, and for lambda closer, the closer you get to 1, then you will have more focus on risk, and you wouldn't get this picture. But then you can play with this and see. I mean, as far as lambda is not exactly 0, I think you will get a result which is you get an optimal solution. You will get maybe a hugely leveraged solutions, leveraged portfolio. Leveraged portfolio is exactly this, that you are, in this case, what's happening when I say I have 100 and minus 99. So I'm actually borrowing money, right, by shorting to have a leveraged position. And that's where the danger comes in, right? So that's, I'm investing 100 times more, so I'm leveraging my position by 100. That's what leveraging means in financial markets. And there are two ways to leverage. One is by shorting. The other is by actually borrowing money directly. So to borrow money in both cases, either by short selling stocks up front or by borrowing money from the markets. I'll get back to the other case. Actually, that's one of the other points I'm going to go through today. Any questions on shorting to understand what shorting is about? Right? So that was the first topic.